So hi everyone, welcome to another Dev Q&A. For those of you who don't know, I'm Juff. I'm one of the devs here. I've been here forever. As you all know, the server will be launching on September 27th. For those of you who are new and don't really know what's going on, this server is a long-running custom EverQuest server that is being relaunched. As you said, we're restarting on the 27th of September. Tonight, I've got Duke and Cole with me. All right, so as I said, I'm Juff. I'm here with Cole and Duke. We're going to answer some of the questions that have come in. We're going to answer some of the questions that come up in chat. I'm going to start with one of these questions from the petitions we got in. I'll read it, give people a chance to answer. You know how this works. All right, this is a long one, so I need to look through here and try to find something I can actually answer. All right, so the first question comes from Alarcon, and it asks, the Enchanter Ancient Spell, Cloak of the Unseen. Can we make this target the whole group? Group invisibility exists at level 40, and clerics get sun skin at 51. Opinions?
Well, what happens is that the state of the spell gets toggled every time the question got asked. So I think it was like 3 times, maybe.
That's fair.
Maybe yes.
So that's something that I'm not opposed to. That's definitely something we could do. It's not a huge deal. That should be fine.
I'm not opposed to it either. I mean, we already can combine the two. So
yeah. So yeah, that's just a yes. It's an easy change.
Sorry, that question was from Alarcon.
So there's a bunch of questions here from Alarcon. I'm probably not going to read all of these. So
gotta share the love.
Yeah. So I'm going to move on to this one because it says Torment of Nerd, which is a level 34 enchanter dot. It says the spell is an orphan that seems to be left over from an old dot line. It's an itch and whiz debuff with a small dot and a mana drain. Can we buff this spell and add more entries for lower and higher levels?
I remember seeing this question earlier.
So
typically what it looks like is you take an Excel page, put the original spell at its point and say, are we able to expand the spell to lower levels, to higher levels? What is the intent? Isn't it a mana drain?
It is, yeah. Mana drain debuff.
So there's this other thing about kind of mana drain being something that was important at certain point in times and just doesn't do anything nowadays. I had an idea where like mob take more damage if their mana is drained or something, right? Just a global incentive, but that's just a random idea. I think with that spell you have to really dig into what is the intent between mana drain spells, because it just exists. Yeah, so mana drain, a lot of these tools are basically, so when you create a character or an NPC, it auto-populates their health and mana. And in the olden days, there wasn't a scripting like Lua or anything. Nowadays, we have Lua, so there was a lot of auto-pilot things. Basically, like when you created the NPC, it would auto-generate like its AI and hit points and mana, and a lot of that stuff was based on that, and mana drain meant something. The important thing is that when a developer goes to make content, they have to kind of be aware, do I want this content to require mana drain? And it's kind of like if I made a city and didn't create any pickpocketing mobs, right? Because it's the same thing with pickpocketing. You have to intentionally go in and add the content. So it's an ability that's a content enabler. Just is hard to catch that when a developer is making, especially newer developers, you're not aware of every mechanic. I think Grinkles is pretty good at, covering all those bases, but
yeah. And on top of that, when you have a knight in your group or raid, and you do need a mana drain at that point, it's kind of a joke at that point because their Tears of the Void kind of just tears right through their mana.
Okay, sorry,
I
I was
think that's
dealing with
some.
Yeah,
I
the dead end spells is interesting. I think you can create spells that are niche one-offs, right? That don't necessarily have to do anything. I think this gets into a deeper rule, which is that there's a lot of varying players who play the game, and some players may really enjoy the thematic element of the game or of a spell, and maybe it's not the best button pusher, right? And like if you're like, well, that's not efficient, we should remove it, right? Well, at that point, it's just kind of like a streamlined. It's like, how do we make my computer more efficient? I want my computer to run as efficient as possible, but this is an EverQuest game, right? Not everything has to be completely efficient, I guess. So I would rather just leave the kind of thematic spells there, and just if balance requires a new spell or a new ability, you add the ability and just kind of maybe leave the old one there.
One thing to note about a spell is I believe that's a carryover from live. For a long time, the leveling spells were literally just copy and paste from live. It wasn't until I'd say less than 10 years ago we started making an effort to fix a lot of the leveling problems, because there were so many issues with classes getting nothing. Or you'd go 10 levels and you might get a tiny upgrade, and that's it. So some of those spells are just sort of orphans because they're taken straight from the source and we didn't really do anything with them. Alright, so pretty much all of these are enchanter related, so I'm gonna hit off a few more quick ones. Because this one I don't know the answer to, and Nicole might. With the new AA Doppelganger, does the pet proc the enchanter's weapon?
I don't believe we added that. We did talk about it though.
Yeah, I couldn't remember what ended up happening with it.
I think it would have been. It definitely takes the illusion of the weapon.
I know that.
In the ratio, I could easily add Fox Leader. It's just a matter of such a new skill. It's tough to balance. Right? You might have some crazy procs at it. Wait, didn't you tell me that you were the one that found that mob's proc rate is a flat percentage, right? Not off the weapon?
Well, that's on mob abilities. That's not necessarily on weapons. That's if you assign a mob, you assign the mob the ability to proc. Like the Necropet is a perfect example of this. The Necropet has a innate proc, and that's just a flat percent chance of proc no matter what their delay is. It's always the same. So you give
so we got into so we got into like the AI of pets. I think we could make some cool things with pets going forward, because a lot of these, I don't think we had done a pet class balance until recently. So we got into a lot of the AI, realized that there are easier ways to do certain things, and I think you're going to see a lot of cool pet stuff post-launch. You will see cool pet stuff post-launch.
All right. Okay. So there's way more questions in this hour competition, but I'm gonna move on because that's a lot. Got a lot of enchanter questions today.
The third question is, can you answer another question from Alacron?
That was like 3 or 4. No. I think we should move on. So this question is from Calvin, and it says, will the level 52 spell Trickster's Augmentation be updated to better align with the upcoming enchanter changes? Specifically, remove the imp illusion component. Consider increasing the proc rate or enhancing the proc effect of the spell. So if I remember correctly, that illusions the target into an imp and gives them a threat proc. If I remember correctly.
Yes.
That sounds right.
So the imp illusion has the obvious issue of it makes it so it doesn't stack with any other illusions, and I think it's got a levitate, so it shouldn't be useful in any zone that's outdoors. Or excuse me, any zone you can't levitate in. I'm trying to think if there's really a balancing concern with them being able to use that. I mean, they're already limited by buff slots.
Didn't enchanters have an entire line of targeted buffs that in that same theme?
I know there's some other illusions that do other things. I don't think there's like a full line of like the Trickster's one. I believe there are several that do like illusions.
There's the fire elemental one, right?
Yeah, but I think that's self-only. I'm not certain.
So there was in the early enchanter discussion, any class early discussion is identifying spell lines, and so that was one that came up. But it's so periphery to the core enchanter that it kind of gets set aside. So it's obviously an interesting line of spells. Like maybe it becomes like pet targetable in the future, right? And then it becomes an interesting way to augment charm pets or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to doing something with it. Just one of those things where I don't know how useful it is. Like I'm not saying obviously it's useless or anything, but I actually have to sit down and like drill down into it to know like how much value does this product actually provide. Because I honestly have no idea.
I mean, in my opinion, like at very early on, when you have like a warrior that's doesn't have like the greatest of weapons, but you still have it and you want to use it as a tank for your raid, like that's a good like use for it. And it's kind of one of those things too, where like it's the Torment of Nurk thing, where it's not the greatest anyways, but at the same time, if everything's gold, then nothing is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's valid. Except that's something we could evaluate. It's probably not going to happen before launch. I've got a notepad in front of me. Perfect. Which is not.
While you're doing that, in chat, someone said pulling mobs inside walls to split here to stay, or something you want to change.
I don't see that going away. Just as a, I can see. Yeah, I can see nav mesh being. So like today, I was thinking after launch, I could start working on something like Gurgles wants NPC light sources, right? And I believe Fuok wants nav mesh. Or I think that would change the entire game, right? Like.
Yeah, it would definitely change so much of the raiding game.
It would definitely change the feel of the game too. There's something about Dalaya, Shards of Dalaya, whatever you want to call it, like both of those, in the way that it is, like that, the mobs running through walls because you accidentally aggroed something. It's like one of the things that you would just really think about, and like when you're thinking about Zod or Dalaya. That is not how I pronounce Dalaya. Dalaya. I've heard 5 different ways, and probably.
Shards of Dalaya.
Alright, you guys are ready? I'm going to go into the next petition. Oh, this is a good question that I hadn't thought about. Are Raven Ward and similar clickies, such as Nature Ward and Planar Ward, going to go on a shared cooldown similar to DPS clickies? I mean, they're currently not. Are they going to?
Well, all clicky cooldowns have to be on a shared timer.
Well, they're on -1. Yeah, they're not.
Oh, yes. I gotcha.
They're on the generic self-timer. So we could share them. This is one of those things that have to sit down and evaluate. It would probably make sense just so that people don't feel like they need to go farm every single one of them on all of their characters. At the same time, like, I do want to be careful with how much stuff we read because there's some amount of like fun in just having a bag full of cookies. The main thing I want to limit is like raid balance stuff where, you know, in the past there was definitely an issue sometimes where you get to hard content and really just became, okay, how do we kill this? Make sure we have every DPS clicky and everyone in the raid available, and we just cycle through our bags, we click our mind fights, we click our T-shears, you know, click our Bob back, all of those things. And they're fun. Like, DPS cookies are a fun thing. It's just, it's very hard to balance around the people who show up to new content and have all of those things. The people who show up to new content and don't have all of those things. It'd be very hard to make a fight that's like doable for people without everything, and a fight that's not just destroyed by people who have everything. So we've kind of got to find a balance between the two. Moving on.
I was reading Hari's Post, or I thought it was like delay, something like that, like the other.
I can't see. I super can't see the chat for this right now. I'm gonna fix that.
So there's if you're new, there's a command that we added that's there's a sorry, I get interrupted with that. Once you put the Superman shirt on. So we added a command that I don't know what it's like, base illusion or something. So if you have a kind of a, whether it be a spell illusion or clear illusions. So if you like looking like the race you chose to play as, then you can just use clear illusion as you zone in and just maintain your default illusion.
All right, so this is another enchanted question. This is about this is from Merrill's, and it's primarily about the new AAs. So this is kind of long. I had to read through it to actually understand it. But the question is essentially, with the enchanter changes, they're worried that in a small group scenario like a 6-man, having to have 2 good bond or AOD targets essentially put a strain on them having to have, put a strain on ensuring you have 2 good targets. And they're worried that the 2 new AAs between the self AOD and the doppelganger won't be enough in order to make that not a problem.
What's the concern?
So basically, the concern is that if you went to a 6-man group, you're sort of that you'll have to build a group specifically to handle having an enchanter, since you need to buff 2 targets, essentially, and that the AAs we added, doppelganger and destructive surge, won't be enough to offset it. And I don't necessarily think that's invalid in any way, shape, or form. Things to note is like both of those AAs are somewhat experimental, right? Like it's like we could very easily, if you're going to a 6-man and you're saying like, oh, if an enchanter doesn't have perfect group composition, they feel like they can't kill anything, it's pretty easy to go, okay, buff destructive surge to 15% per rank, or buff the contribution of doppelganger by X, Y, Z. It's not super hard, but as far as like, there's always some amount of like group Tetris, right? Like if you're trying to build an optimal group for, let's say, a monk, you probably want something different. You know, you're gonna make sure you have a bard for overhaste versus something like a wizard. You'd probably rather have a beast lord for cunning rather than bard haste. Obviously, the spell focus from bard is nice, etc. So there's always going to be some amount of group Tetris there. If it's a huge problem, though, it should be easy enough for us to fix by just addressing those AAs. Also, it should be noted, like you can load 1 bond and 1 AOD. So like that was sort of the reason we didn't link them, which is we didn't make it so that you could only have one or the other. Excuse me, I still can't speak. When we originally talked about this, we were talking about making it so that you'd have to do 1 and 1. So you'd have 1 bond and 1 AOD. We decided against that because we wanted you to have a little more flexibility. Yeah, it is at the cost of a spell gem, right? Like you do have to use 1 spell gem for each, but we did want to make sure the option was there so that if you do have 1 melee and 1 caster, you can do that. But as I said, it's not a huge change. If enchanters are really underperforming, that's a pretty easy fix.
Did we talk about how enchanter pets were attacking with their shield?
We did not, but that's pretty fun.
So one thing about there was a bug that basically like loaded their sword, and then someone copy pasted it down, and then it loaded their shield onto where their sword slot is. So when enchanter pets attack, they were swinging with a shield in their weapon. That's pulling stats. Now all enchanter pets have a base weapon that you see because it's an invisible man ID. So another thing, they're going to be a little stronger because now they are using a weapon in addition to. So you're going to get that. They basically, you can't give them gear, right? But they will have a weapon equipped. So, so it's a pretty big meta change, or not really meta change, but it's just like it's a large enough change that it's tough to calculate and say, okay, I mean, before, like if you were doing with an enchanter, there's a lot of concerns with how shared mind gave a percentage bonus to a group of 6, and if you were doing, then that was 1/3 of the bonus. We thought about scaling that so it increased as your group went smaller, and if you were solo, it was the max value, right? So historically, enchanters' power decreased the the, the reduced number of individuals they were around. So now, if it's just you soloing, you can now at least bond your pet and AOD yourself, right? So it's I think a huge improvement upon the old style. So it's to be seen, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where like some people are gonna bring in like a wizard and a monk or whatever, like you said before, and have those as your AOD bonds, and maybe that's like the best one, maybe not. There's always going to be that concern of, oh, I can't have, I have to have these two bonded. If I don't have these two in my group, or I have something worse like I don't know, a bard. But say you have 3 enchanters. At the very least, you can bond your pet and yourself with these AAs. So it's more like we're trying to give options too, rather than just you must have the perfect comp for the enchanter.
One other thing I will note that I don't know that people picked up on is with the AoE changes, bonding a mage or AODing a mage did get quite a bit better because before the mage had the AoE crit, the AA that gave them extra rain crit chance, and the enchanter didn't. So you lost like 20% of the rain damage. Now you'll actually get the same spell crit as they do. So that will actually make basically like how valuable AODing and bonding certain classes are is probably going to change some. So that is one thing you have to take into account is like your expectation of what is good now versus what was good then is going to be slightly different.
That's a good point.
And one thing they did say is there seems to be a push to make 6-man groups more flexible, which is definitely something we have been talking about, and we want to make sure like we don't want for a long time when Emberflow was new content, every group started with warrior cleric bard or paladin cleric bard. That was every group, and we don't want that. We want it to be more flexible. Now, we know there's going to be a meta, right? No matter what we do, there's going to be something that is best. There's going to be some perception of what you need to clear content. Like, that is just how human beings work. And we're not going to, like, go out of our way to, like, fight that down to the core. But we do want to make sure things that are balanced in enough, reasonable enough way that it's not like, oh, we could never kill this with a mage or an enchanter or a necro or whatever. If it's a little harder with an enchanter or a mage or whatever on tier, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, it's not ideal. We'd love for it to be every class can do this the exact same, but that's just not realistic in a game with this many moving parts.
What's our next enchanter question?
I don't know. I don't know if the next one is an enchanter question. It is not. This one is from Danar. Okay, so previously, we had the Great Weapon Crunch. Everything had to follow a linear path of progression. Is this still the case? Is there room for outliers above or below the scope? They've activated my trap card. So, as the person who did a lot of this, there was always room for stuff to go up and down, even after the crunch. The problem before was mostly just like the gap was so huge that when we tried to make the gap a number that looked reasonable, it just looked like we neutered everything. There were literal items off of 2 enemies that were about the same difficulty, where one item would be legitimately just a 70% more DPS or 50% more DPS off of 2 enemies that are basically the same. Now, variance, like having differences and stuff, is good. It feels good to get the item that's rarer and cooler. Like, that's just playing video games, right? Everyone wants to have the cool thing. But the big issue that a lot of that stuff caused, when you have an item like, I'm going to say Verdict is probably the perfect example of this, where Verdict was so strong, making an upgrade to Verdict was going to basically be like, if we wanted to make something that wasn't just going to be even more insane, we're going to have to make something like 6 tiers later, And Verdict was just balanced around being rare. Like, that was the whole reason Verdict was so powerful. Well, it also didn't originally work the way it was supposed to, so something just kind of got thrown on it. But something like that, where it's just like, this item is literally 2 times as good as anything else, 3 times as good as anything else, makes it really hard to make items. And really hard to balance content. Because, if like what I said earlier, if you're the guild that has everything and you come up to new content, and it's hard for you, if the next guy coming through, the next guild coming through doesn't have everything, if they didn't spend, 5 years farming Tarouge or whatever, they're just not going to be able to kill it. It was balanced around these people doing that. And we don't want to create content for one group of people. It's very, personally, it's pretty disheartening when you make content and like, even though these people are, like, most of the people who've been at the top end are people I've played the game with, I know them all. It's really disheartening to put out content and go, okay, even if there was even if there were 2 guilds at that exact same tier, like, who were progressing, if there's one guild at that top tier and another guild that's, like, catching up to them, the top guild will generally have farmed so much more gear that trying to put a fight out when you have, an item like Verdict or the old Custo sword, is just so much better than anything else. If that second guild hasn't farmed for 5 years, there's not even a chance. They're going to have to spend 5 years farming just to have a chance. I don't want that. I don't want people to feel like there's no way they can ever catch up. Like, it's just impossible. But at the same time, there needs to be room for variance. One of the problems with setting rules for things like this, I said, like, an item can be between, this bracket. It can be between this number and this number. Everyone defaults to just going all the way to the end. So if I say a number can be, an item can be somewhere between, 1 ratio and a 1.2 ratio. Every weapon's a 1.18, a 1.19, a 1.2. That's what every developer makes. And that's just human nature. But it does make, if you look at the old tiers, you'd go into a zone and you'd have an item like, I'm going to use Caverns of Darkness as an example. At the end, you get the Black and Dragon Spine Cutlass, which is like a little better ratio than the other stuff in it. It's got some better stuff on it. But then you'll have earlier bosses who will drop items that are just, like, infinitely worse than things that came before them. You'll kill a boss and you'll get, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, there's a tank hammer off of one of the bosses in there. And then, like, if you've been raiding other stuff at the tier, that tank hammer is just worse than, like, the outer prison. There's an outer prison spear. There's whale fury. There's just a bunch of stuff. But even though there's the gap there, the gap isn't, it's not 70% or 50%. It's like 15.
Did you say whale fury?
Yeah, WAIL, not WHALE.
Okay.
Eerie of the whale.
Yeah, there's definitely room for variance, but.
So an interesting thing about how weapons got to where they were, like, the old development environment was a lot of individuals like to work alone. Very rarely it seemed like there was collaboration. If you look in the old forums from, like, when they were doing Ikasith, there was definitely evidence of like collaboration. Like, I know Slariel was doing, just made like 300 animal meats and just populated them for people to use in their zones, right? They were definitely collaborating while working together. And so when I came, wasn't a lot of, like, everybody jumping in the voice chat, having meetings. None of that for many years. Just kind of the environment post 2.5. And I think when you are isolated as a developer, it's not their fault, but you end up just looking at things kind of at a kind of like a vertical slice and not looking at the game as a whole. Also, a lot of new developers, when they first start out, they're starting out as a developer right out of the raiding scene, so their eyes are focused on end game, right? And fixing some bugs with doing some things with Grinkles kind of helped me expand my. It helps expand your vision to say, like, hey, the game exists not just at the end game. And so you end up with all these weapons that are kind of all over the place, and so kind of going through and streamlining them to do it that fast is kind of a tough process, and just tweak those. And I think you can make an item like a Verdict stand out if you are clever with, say, scripting or item differentiation, where it's good in certain scenarios, right? Because people create markets finding a niche of something, right? It's the same idea. How do I make this item good in this kind of window of accessibility.
Okay, I'm gonna look and see what our next question is. I think this is our last pre-prepared question. Okay, this one is also from Danar. It says, "Are there plans to introduce arcane knights or berserkers down the line?"
We've talked about it.
Are there plans to introduce arcane knights or berserkers down the line?
I made it another class. We could easily make a class.
Yeah.
Not easily, but it's there.
So there are some limitations to making arcane knights, and the big one is that if we wanted arcane knights,
we'd all fight and break up, and the sorcerer would die. There's going to be so many disagreements.
Well, no, I was going to say that. So if we were to use the berserker like class ID and the things associated with berserker, because that is not a mana class, that would mean the arcane knight couldn't have mana. Really, like that is the client limitation. The client will display mana for that class. So we could do arcane knight as a berserker class, which it would just be it would be difficult, and it would be one of those things where like we might not be able to deliver what people actually expect from an arcane knight.
Arcane knights have yellow mana.
Yeah. There were something that someone had suggested would be doing something like if you wanted to make an arcane knight, you would start as like a different class, and then they'd have a deity that they were sworn to automatically, and that all of their stuff would key off of that instead. So, like, as an example, let's say you start as a wizard, and then you could, in the dream, hail someone, get a flag, and once you're flagged, you're now an arcane knight. Your deity locks, something like that. So there are workarounds.
That's a really good idea.
So there are ways we could do it. It's just a question of, how can we make something that will actually deliver like the theme and idea of being an arcane knight to people? Do we want to use berserker for that? Like I said, wouldn't have a mana bar. So there's a bunch of questions. And there's also the idea of like, what role does an arcane knight fill? There's talk of it being a tank originally, and then I know there was also talk of it being like a spell blade sort of caster. So that's one of those things where it's like when you have infinite options, it's hard to make a choice. So this would be the sort of thing we'd have to sit down and argue a bunch about to figure out what's what.
I'm gonna cry about it, actually.
That's fair. You're allowed to do that too. But like I said, it's definitely something we could do, and it's something I'd be keen to do in the future. But it really just depends on what people want and how we can actually make it. How it can realize what an arcane knight actually is. Let's see if I can actually get my Discord chat to show up so I can see all these questions. Aha.
Oh, but it shows in the stream. I can see it.
You've ruined it. You ruined the illusion.
It's fine. Seeing the heads.
I think I can solve this one. Yeah, I can. I can't hear myself.
Your wife saying no.
For now, I can see the chat, and Myers is asking, "Are you taking any idea?"
Yeah, I can read some of the chat questions for you also.
That would be awesome, because I was trying to view them on the other thing, and it was just breaking. Because I have 2 copies of Discord open. I was trying to look at the second one. It was just breaking. So yeah, if you want to answer.
I think Juff broke the stream. He totally did.
Oh, did I break it? Are we back?
No, we're back.
Okay, good. Sorry.
You have a list of questions. It's only fair that me and Duke get to read the chat questions.
That's fine. Go for it.
It's true.
So I'm going to just read something someone just said about Bane. There's a full Bane rework coming. It's on the list. It might not be done before launch. If it's not done before launch, it'll be done shortly after launch. Do you want to talk about that at all, or just want to leave it at that?
Well, we say you won't have as many things in your bags in order to
we could
have
talk about
all those Bane types.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about the problem. That would be fine.
Yeah, so we usually identify a problem and without having gotten to the solution yet. So As far as I understand it, it's just Bane arrows suck, and I don't know what the other stuff is.
I mean, so the big picture problem with Bane is just that there are so many types. It's not easy for players to tell what type it is. From a developer standpoint, it sucks because you need to be like, oh, this content I'm making is all amphibians. Is there a good amphibian Bane for them to wear? No? Okay, now I need to go make sure there's an amphibian Bane. Like, it's just a kind of a messy, convoluted system. And there's just too many body types. Obviously, arrows have the worst use of it because now rangers are particularly susceptible to it, where it's like, I lose 13% of my damage or 12% of my damage if I don't know the right body type. That's not great. So they said
what if Bane were simpler, like small, medium, large, or giant?
I mean,
humanoid.
Fluak already crafted something up to solve this problem. If you remember,
okay.
we talked. You and I had a conversation.
No, I don't remember. Did we?
Yeah, we did.
Please refresh my memory because I don't remember anything.
One second, my wife is in the room. I see what she wants. What?
Do you just use like a big tree cutting axe to chop down giants or something?
I am back. Hello.
So here's a chat question. Can we all agree that Custo's sword was nerfed so hard that it made the item not worth getting, however? And that is an issue we should avoid.
So here's the thing about Custo. That sword has a couple of problems. From one, it being a combination of two relatively rare items basically means that it's going to have to feel insane for it to ever feel like it was worth your time. Like that it's just a limit of you need these two rare drops in order to make this thing. Thing two is Custo was it was basically impossible to make a better version of Custo sword unless you literally took Custo sword, made a copy of it, and just upped the numbers. That was the only real option. Because Overhaste is so strong, it was the only source of it. It was either going to have to be something like you have a sword that procs like 80% chance to proc Moon Comet or something. It's going to be like something. That sort of like ridiculousness is where you're getting with something like Custo sword. This is one of those things where it should have just never been launched as it was, but no one was talking about stuff. Stuff was just getting made. There wasn't a lot of oversight from anyone, and that's just sort of what happens. In the past, when stuff, in let's say 2008 to 2011 or so, when stuff like this was happening, there was generally someone being like, "Hey, this is a problem," and it would get fixed. And then after Icus launched, so many of the devs just sort of like went away. They left. Like I don't fault any of them. Some of them have been devs for 5, 6, 10 years. Like this is not something that most people are going to do forever. But just no one cared to fix it and just sort of got grandfathered in. And there wasn't really anything we could do about it and there's this issue of like players do not like to have the same item forever. No one is happy. Like getting that cool item that's really fun and new and rare is awesome. Wearing that same item for 5 years sucks, frankly. Like a lot of the fun of a game like this is trying to get new gear. If you can never replace your gear, it just does not feel good. So there's just like a delicate line we have to leave with trying to figure out like how good can we make things and have them be replaceable and have them feel good and special when you get them. Like it's a very delicate, hard thing to balance. And like when we did the rep and rework, it was just that there were so many things that had just been like, if you looked at the items from like tier 1 to tier 10, for the most part they were like pretty, they mostly fit. Like obviously there was some variance up and down, but there was very few items where it was just like this item is off of Gongaworth and this item is off of some mob and lower Thaz, where the weapons would literally be like a 50 or 75% delta. And it's very hard to like actually make that, to fix that once people start doing that. Especially so this is something that we have to work on as a team, and it's like there's a sense of one-upsmanship that exists from developers. And this isn't like, people being a jerk or anything. It's just like, someone made this cool thing. I want to make sure people want to kill my zone.
Yeah, when the server gets relaunched, these devs just delete your content straight up. Gone. I'm just kidding.
where we're just like people are like, oh, but this person made this cool thing. What if I made that +1 or that +2? And then you just get this sort of like Citadel does not. If it only
Well, I think you look up to the developers, right? You look up to them and their creations, and then you model it after what they've done. If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question here.
Go for it.
So it says, I know everyone is like asleep, but are there any thoughts out there to like night weapons, and then in parentheses, didn't play warrior, just smooth out weapon curve outside of Voss sword? Once I got final sword, I got nothing but cradle, which took literal years of actual active rating. I think before final Vol, I may have used mindful one-hander.
So is this class a paladin? Is this person a paladin or
this is from Eric.
Okay, so
A-I-R-E-K.
yeah, I know who Eric is. So I'm trying to think. So
it was actually from General.
Oh, okay. So like as far as that goes, I'm trying to think. So honestly, there just wasn't really a lot of night one-handers made at that point. From talking to devs back then, the whole reason for that is that the Von Knight swords existed, so they felt like they didn't want to step on those toes. Like there was a lot of fear of like, oh, this item is from a very long quest reward. We don't want to make something better than that, or like it's. I remember hearing Zayla say like, oh, I don't want to just invalidate that. On some level, like I agree. Like there probably shouldn't be something, at you can complete the Voss sword at like tier 10 start of Sanctum. There probably shouldn't be something at tier 10 that's better than that.
Yeah, like at that era, they didn't want warrior scythe. They didn't want that void to diminish between warriors and knights, right? Like the one-handed riposte stance.
Yeah.
Heal to fool, right? You don't want the knight stepping on the warrior's toes in 2007.
Yeah, so there's definitely like a lot of this was, and this is, I'm going to say this now, this is something we're going to try to be better about with the server launch, is going wide rather than tall. At the end of the last server, there was sort of like, because it was so hard to actually put out a new zone with like the limitations that were placed on us and the actual ability to get a zone patched in, that if you were putting something in, it kind of needed to be the last thing +1. And which just means you have like one tier 14 zone, one tier 15 zone. And then other than like a sprinkling of stuff here and there, that's what you got. So, if you're a knight and you want a new weapon, if you're a monk and you want a new fist, if there wasn't any put in that one zone, there's nothing. And like we have no idea when there's going to be a new zone coming out. So we'd rather try to go wide and make sure that like, at tier 13, there's 3 raid zones, 4 raid zones. At tier 14, there's 3 raid zones and 4 raid zones. For a couple reasons. This gives you, multiple guilds the ability to farm. It lets you create more unique loot, so you don't have stuff where it's like every character looks the same, which was a problem for, maybe not a problem, but it was definitely like, you'd look at, the top 10 clerics or whatever, and they'd all be wearing like 95% of the same gear that have like 2 items different or whatever. And part of that, because there was very little competition, right? People weren't fighting over gear. And part of that was also just, there's one zone. Like, you're going to wear what's there. So, Meryl's question is, are disciplines going to be affected by weapon and offense skills rather than guaranteed hit? I don't think there's any plans to change that.
No, I think that was actually a solution to giving melee classes consistent DPS. Forget what the problem was.
That's part of it, especially with rangers. If it's a little strong at low levels, like I'd be more apt to like tune it down at low levels. Like I know there's been a bunch of talk. So big picture, when we were doing the initial discipline reworks, what we were trying to the problem we were trying to solve is that so much character power had been given just from items at the extremely high tiers. If your class didn't get those things or you didn't have those items, your character power was just all over the place. What we try to do is like backport that power throughout the leveling process up through the tiers. And it was kind of hard to get it right to try to make sure that like we weren't putting too much power at level 10 or whatever when you get your first discipline, and making sure you had enough at tier 13 or whatever. and we were kind of limited in how often we could change stuff before. Now it's going to be a lot easier for us. Like, oh, this is too strong at the level 55 version of the system is too strong. It's very easy to just tweak some numbers, have a quick reboot, problem solved.
Yep. One quick point to Meryl's question, and then I'm going to go to the next question. But another problem that I don't think players, well, maybe they do, but when you're grouping, the AC of mobs don't get debuffed as much as when you're in a raid scenario, right? So because disciplines use physical mitigation, which is pretty much unresistible, it gives you more consistent damage in EXP zones. So there's a question here from Sin. I have a question. Are you in danger of exceeding the physical limits of the game with all of these additional stats, or is there a lot of headroom for growth? So we do have in-game limits that we hit, like Flowing Thought, Critical Strike chance, Mind Shields, right? And already at the current, I think, Spires, you begin to start hitting those limits, right? And as a developer, right, how do you make, because you just talked about it's exciting getting new upgrades. Well, how do you continue to make new exciting upgrades when there are class limits, basically, or statistic limits? How would you go about solving that, Juff?
I don't know. It's a hard question. I mean, if you look at any gear from modern EQ and you look at what their gear looks like, it's actually kind of frightening. Where you'll just have every stat is like every item has just like a clicky a proc, a focus effect. Every stat, huge numbers on everything. Like those are definitely things you have to be cognizant of. And like we can definitely do things with increasing some of those caps, right? Like we have AAs for it. We have AAs for things like increasing the Flowing Thought cap. We could definitely do AAs for more stuff like that. Obviously, right now with the server relaunching, we don't really need to add more AAs. There are plenty, so that's not a concern right now. People not having gear, but in the future, it'd definitely be nice to increase the caps in some of those things.
Yeah, and something to add on to that, we could, in theory, mess with heroic stats, but that would be a lot of implementation.
Well, the only problem, so someone asked me about this the other day. The only problem with heroic stats is just things like dex and agility we can't do a ton with. We can do some, but we just have to be careful because there are, flat hit percentage caps and flat avoidance stuff.
I think we can.
I just saw this. I just saw this item that Tor linked in the chat. That is that's a little bit of HP and mana.
So the question about instancing we've answered before, but I'll answer it really quickly. Could instancing happen at some point in the future? Yes. Are we just going to instance everything that already exists? No. This would be the sort of thing where we would use it. We would probably be designing content specifically to be instant, or not just turning everything that already exists into instances. We'd rather make sure that there's plenty of content for you to do at any given time, rather than there being one raid zone at tier 11 and everyone does that in their own instance. We'd rather make sure there's enough content so you can all just so there's people have stuff to raid. We're hoping that there's enough separation between the guilds that not everyone is. I mean, there's so much verticality already. The hope is that you're going to have a guild or two at the top, a couple guilds a few tiers below, a couple guilds a few tiers below, and that people will just sort of naturally spread out.
I mean, we had ideas for season 3, right? So I think I kind of like that framework, right? It's already in the game, in the core code. There's a lot of interesting things we could do in that year. Because I think the game is, if you look at any snapshot in window of time, is tier 10 rating, 10 years ago better than tier 12 rating, 5 years ago? Or is playing the game at a snapshot in time, launch is going to be exciting and it's levels 1 to 10. Is that better than tier 12 rating? You're still playing the game. It's just all perspective of where you are. You're just comparing yourself. Maybe this is more like a deeper psychological point. Are you comparing yourself to a previous state? You have to keep increasing. And so now is a full server reset. So now everybody is gaining power. There was a question of do we slow down the EXP gain in the beginning of the launch just to kind of allow everyone to enjoy, the beginning. I don't know. That ever got answered.
So, as far as someone asks, is there a plan to adjust the leveling speed to 65 for launch? Honestly, no. Like 1 to 30 is actually super quick. My biggest concern with launch is actually not leveling speed; it's going to be congestion. Like I was literally today thinking about how can we do things to handle congestion at launch. If we don't know how many players are going to be, my guess is, there's like almost 500 players in the Discord. Not all of them are going to be there at launch, but there's probably going to be 600 to 800 characters logged in across the, whatever it is, 6 or 7 starting zones. So that's something that's on the attempt to fix the problem thing from today.
Well, it's very interesting. We now have a few more starting zones that can help with that issue.
We definitely do. It's not. So yeah, we will see who's there. I would expect. Like I said, I'm expecting between like 300 and 600 characters, but like I said, there's almost 500 people in Discord, and obviously not everyone's going to be there right at launch. But
they're going to be boxing too. I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could just load a zone in, just repop the zone.
Yeah, I was looking to see if we had any hooks that dynamically respawn mobs today. I don't know.
I have an easy question.
Blazing Forge global variable, and you just kind of adjust it.
That's what I was
when
looking
a mob
for.
dies. Yeah.
I just wasn't sure if I just couldn't instantly find anything. So I was like, I wonder if there's something for this.
Depop takes an argument that will reset
Right.
Will depop it and respawn in duration, so you just have to adjust that. Basically.
I see a very easy question.
Go for it.
Will the devs be playing?
Yes.
It's from Zaltek. I'm psyched. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I want to break my sleep schedule for it.
So I'm definitely going to make sure there is some way that we can dynamically adjust spawns, just that we can account for, the amount of players that are in a zone. Like, if you look at the very beginning of the newbie yards, most of the enemies now have like a 60-second spawn time. When you consider it takes even unless you have a full group, it's going to take you 30 seconds to kill something like with a duo. That's not the end of the world. But then when you look further out in the zone, you start hitting 3-minute spawn times, 10-minute spawn times.
I mean, I'm sure there'll be more grouping, right? So
yeah,
you'd have to exceed the, I don't know, maybe remove raid XP penalty in newbie yards.
Maybe.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, it would definitely be one of those things where I know there's a solution. I just didn't have enough time to really dig into it. So, at least I know I'm going to be playing in a group that's all staff members, just because in case we need to go put out a fire, if I'm playing with 2 other staff members, it's like, oh, we can stop what we're doing and go put out a fire, rather than it being like, sorry guys, I've got to leave, and half of the group is just like, but you're our tank or whatever.
We could flag everybody PvP in newbie yards. That would fix the issue.
Yeah, just let them kill each other. That would be chaos.
But only if I can kill them on my GM tune too.
Brims, I didn't see your second question. Let me.
Meanwhile, I need to write down a reminder about my spawn times in the new zone, because now I'm realizing it might be a little too long.
What time are we launching the server?
It's going to depend on availability. We still got to hammer that out.
3 a.m.
I'm not talking about Acassith stuff because I don't want to get killed by Mars. So. If you ask me questions about Acassith, the rule is we don't talk about Acassith.
There are lizards there. The lizard people that stand on 2 legs.
Cactuses.
Yes, my favorite bit of Ikasif lore is there are no orcs in Ikasif according to the main quest.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, one of the first book you get for the main quest literally says that orcs are extinct on Ikasif.
Oh,
Are they really?
Yeah, it's at the bottom of
not.
the first section in the first lore book. For everyone but you, Steve.
Yeah, we'll constantly smooth out dungeons. And we just had a discussion about this week. It just can't be done anytime soon.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some dungeon balancing done. There's been some done already, a little bit. This is going to be one of those things where there's going to be a bunch of balancing stuff done. We want to do some stuff to try to incentivize people selling rather than just vendoring so much of it. But
I think we got a copy of Famelo, right? Or is that a spoiler?
Well, we do, but the things you're doing might change that. So
okay.
Oh, and that in itself is a spoiler.
Yeah. Remember the thing you were telling me you were going to be doing? That's going to change that. Make me write a whole Famelo from scratch.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
I think it's list sold. No changes to list sold.
Items. What am I most excited about? That is an interesting question.
It's a very good question.
Arguing with players in a year and a half from now.
Honestly, I'm excited to people just get to experience things. Oh, I'm excited for my zone preview, which comes out tomorrow.
Ooh, that's a good one. I am excited for a lot more frog logs to be hopping around. That's going to be fun.
Juff, can you add an extension to the Famelo where you can print a resume with your Famelo character on it?
Please make sure that it's PDF only.
Danar, so it is not a water zone. Here's my spoiler. The zone I made is the zone that was converted from a raid zone to a 6-man. That is what you'll find out. You'll find out the rest tomorrow.
Find out in one good weekend.
Yes, Duke. The zone I made was originally going to be part of Season 3. It was actually my dev application. I started working on that, and then everything sort of went. So Meryl's, we kind of had to. It causes a bunch of combat issues where it literally just changes things hitboxes. So we didn't really want to because it's kind of cool, but it literally anything that's sufficiently big, it changes if you can hit the mob in certain scenarios or not. So we literally just couldn't not. So, okay. People keep asking about the mob. We're not ready to reveal what's going to change. I will say this. 2 new mob portals got added this week.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure people can figure out what those 2 would be, though.
I will say this. You can figure out what they are. You can figure out what they are, but you won't figure out where they are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Bottomless Sea of Swords and the very, very top skyline of North Badlands. It also takes away your levitate. I can say it is not in my zone.
Yeah, Duke Zone does not have a mob. It does have some really cool portals, though. What do you call them, portals, Duke?
Yeah, portals.
It's fair.
Not mansion portals.
Myers, here's the thing. I almost made a druid. I've been playing a druid on the server for 10 years. But when I started here, I started on a shaman. I always loved my shaman. The reason I quit my shaman was because they were just not in a good place for so long. And
emotionally.
The other problem, both emotionally and balance-wise. And then part of that was just because there was a certain fear of stepping on clerics' toes by buffing druid in any way that wasn't just making them better at tank healing. And that druid just kept constantly getting buffed to be better at tank healing, which made shamans have this really awkward position of, our role has been taken by druids and we can't group heal, so why would you bring one? I have one mode and it's talking about class changes.
It's true. It's been the past 2 months, really.
I mean, just honestly, like, I want druids to be good. I want shamans to be good. I want everyone, like, in my heart of hearts, my preferred setting would be at the start of every raid, you grab a shaman, a druid, and a cleric, and then you should have to make it somewhat of a decision about what the last two are. I don't think that's necessarily where we ended up. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, we got there, because I don't think that's true. I did try to make things closer. To be clear, clerics are still going to be the best healers. That's still baked in. But I also don't want the gap between clerics and other healers to be so huge that you get to a point where it's just like, there's no way we can kill this without 3 clerics. And as someone who played a druid for 10 years, when you're doing Upper Thaz progress, I had to have multiple bosses nerfed because they were impossible to heal solo as a druid, like heal a group as a druid. And they were just fine on the cleric. It wasn't even close. The cleric could just group heal through it and pretend nothing else existed. It wasn't a skill issue, Stever. There was no way you could get off. There was 2 fights that was a problem. The initial Magma, which got nerfed. And then the second one was Air Boss, where you just couldn't actually get 2 group heals off in between the AoEs, and your group heal was too small to handle it. Racial XP penalties. So, currently, most racial XP penalties are really small. The big issue here is mostly that a lot of this is perception. Not that they don't matter, because they do matter. But if you actually look at how the racial penalties or bonuses work, a lot of the time they end up being pretty small. The issue is going to be like at basic like breakpoints where you're like, oh, I now have, I got 5% more XP, so now I have 50 more AAs, right? That 50th AA makes a big difference between the 48th AA a lot of the time, because there's so many things that are like, this AA costs 50, so if I now have this extra 50 and they didn't, I have 3% more power than this other person. But the trade-off there is also that once you get to a certain point, the value of AAs drops off drastically. Once you hit like 4,000 or so, like what's left is so minimal. It's like, I get it. I understand why people care about it. Like, it is something that matters. But we did not want to spend a bunch of time trying to fix racials when they're, honestly, we already fixed a bunch of stuff that was just broken, stuff that didn't work, like barbarian racials that just didn't work, and human racials that just didn't work. Had to fix those. Humans were getting half-elf damage reduction to spells. There's a bunch of little things where it's literally just like, this did nothing, or this worked like,
a lie.
Yeah. So I'm going to share this because this is one of my favorite things that I've stumbled upon since being a dev. I was recently looking through the code for how Bash works and how Kick works. And just, any of those activated abilities, Bash, Kick, Flying Kick. Randomly in that code, there's a section that just says, Troll more Smash, Troll damage times 1.25. I don't know why.
That's right.
But it's bash damage, not just damage, though, right?
Yeah, it's any activated ability would tag this. So Bash, Kick. It's just arbitrary. I honestly have no idea why it's there. It's just there.
It's so that everyone rolls a rogue troll or troll rogue.
It's just so bizarre.
Backstab activated ability.
It basically
it's just Fuwok propaganda at this point.
It's not Fuwok, because Fuwok doesn't have core. Fuwok didn't have core access when that was put in. I don't know who put it there.
Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it.
Like I said, it's just random. I don't know why it's there.
If any more questions,
I'm sure there are. Just be clear, we're not adding any more race stuff right now. Might be more in the future. We're not looking to just add them to add them. If we add them, we want to have a good reason. Like, if someone wants to make a cool zone themed around adding something, like if Rickles wants to do his thing and be like, I want to make, something random out there, we'll consider it. But at the same time, like, it's a very delicate balance, because when any class can be anything, it makes your race not feel special. Like, it no longer makes race selection feel like it matters a ton. But at the same time, everything being super limiting also isn't great. So you have to be delicate about like what we add and what we don't. Oh, spell effect stuff. That's something that we'll probably talk about in the future. So I can say in a GM at least we can see it, but it doesn't update right. Most of it, like personally, I don't have a problem with you seeing, your dots or whatever on a mob. The only thing would be like Mez and Charm not giving you accurate information. Like I wouldn't really want you being able to see, my Charm has 4 ticks left on it. My Mez has 2 ticks left on it. But outside of that, I personally have no problems. I don't know about how anyone else in the team feels, but
You mean like the debuff icons?
yeah, the debuff window.
Okay, so I wanted to make that an enchanter ability so that they could debuff the target, and then it allowed the entire raid to see the debuffs on the target for a duration.
I mean, I don't know. We'll
I don't know, or you just let everybody,
Yeah, for most of it, I don't think it matters. The only thing because honestly, if you're doing something like dots or a debuff, you can just set up a Gina trigger anyway and just track it for you. There's no reason to not just let the UI do it and save the players the hassle of having to set up a Gina thing for it.
Yeah, it will be precisely accurate.
My wife says she has flagged some more questions for me.
Yes.
While you guys do more questions, I actually have to head out. I just got a phone call and I need to respond to it real quick.
All right, Duke.
If I'm back, I'll be back. But if not, bye, everybody.
All right, so this question is from Brims, which is, can you go into how charisma and mob resist interact with a player casting a spell on a mob? Maybe how the calculations work and how much charisma actually impacts landing spells. I can't right now because I don't have the code in front of me. I'm going to see if I can fix this. Right now it's showing my blank Discord.
You should put the chat there, right? When you moved the chat in earlier.
It's not that easy. I don't like this is Rari setup, so like this is one of those things where like I don't know the math off the top of my head. I looked at it a while ago. It does. I know it does have it until up to the cap. It does play a big role in landing spells. Once you hit 335 with all the AAs, anything past that's a much smaller amount. But like basically any stat until you hit the stat cap is super strong. I would say the only one that's not honestly probably not that strong is like stamina because it's just extra hit points. Like it's certainly good. Extra HP is good, but it's not as good as like reducing your resist chance or doing a bunch of extra damage from strength. So, like I said, I would have to look. I would be comfortable giving you like super deep details, but giving you like a better understanding would be absolutely fine. All right, so here's a series of questions from Thorheim, which are all pretty simple. Will the runic pet for the necromancer remain the brown new model skeleton? I don't think its model's changed. Are Ixar, Beastlords, and Codairs using Wrinkle's teeth, new skins, or the existing model? They will be the old model Codair. What is the staff stance when players customizing client-side graphics? I remember an SOD Wrinkles had a method for players reverting some models to old and interested in this universe. I don't have a problem with that. The only thing I'll note is that chances are every time you patch, it's going to overwrite your files. So that's something you need to be aware of.
Create a toggle for that. A lot more control over things, so
there we go. So yeah, that's one of those things where it's like, I have no problem with you using the new pet models or old pet models, whatever you want. I don't know what's going to entail changing. This is a Grinkles thing, so you'd have to ask him. Where did the chat go? I think those are the only two she had flagged.
Is the list sold banking system going to be the same for the economy? It's going to be exactly the same because we haven't addressed it. If there's nothing wrong with it, it might theoretically change.
Rims, I don't understand your question. Does that interact differently with how the resists work now that you've made the reduction rather than the used to work?
We have a lot of cool web tools. I mean, we could probably do something where you're able to buy something for your character while you're at home, basically from the web interface. I don't know. That could be pretty neat. Like, yeah, look at that item.
We have a lot of options now. It's just a question of like what Right. So Steve are right now there, and I think that's probably something we could do. Again, that's like a cold side thing. Generally, that's sort of like core stuff backend. I mostly leave to him, so that would be, that's cold time and that's expensive time.
Oh, queuing up tells.
Yeah.
I like the big projects. That's really kind of what I do.
Oh, I know.
I just forget it because it just like just keep bringing it up until like it's fixed. Like that's like every change is for what I do is to have an idea of how to make the change, and on a scale of 1 to 3, how likely am I how great is that understanding? And then like queuing tells when it comes to like zone and server communication. Like right now is a problem that bugs me when I'm testing a zone and I reboot it. If it kicks my character in a certain way, I have to control alt delete and the client, right? It's generally speaking, I can like the old client I was testing, because what I do is I make a change, reboot the server, log in again, right? Make a change, log /Q out. So in the old client, 3 Q outs, the client crashes. ROF2, I can do that 150 times and it just keeps going. But if I if we reboot the server, a lot of people are AFK, the client disconnects. And like there's a way that EQEMU, when you reboot a zone, it just kicks all the clients and sends it the appropriate what the client needs to cleanly close, right? It'd just be a quality of life for the development process. So like things like that, or like queuing tells, it's like you'd have to storm in world and then send them to the zone. Is it possible? Absolutely. Yeah. They'd probably send people like, hey, just so you know, it's broken. It's sending me passwords or something like that.
I'm just thinking about
I'm like, no.
Carrier pigeon thing he was talking about last week.
Like, I'm not joking. We got a petition one time. Someone in the newbie zone started, and they said, I just got to tell. And it was the SSH key, just some SSH key they got as a DM. Like, we don't know how that happens, or I don't even know if it was legit, but it was them receiving a message in zone that was just really weird. Like, I have no idea how that even happened.
So for now, Benson Lissel is staying. It might get addressed in the future, but we gotta end up pick and choose our battles, and we have more important things to do. There are significant bar changes coming. I'm actually putting the finishing touches on them now. They'll be going out in a couple weeks.
So what if like simple change, like a Lissol doesn't necessarily need you to be targeting a banker, right? And we could do quality of life, so you could view more queries. You know what I mean? Like maybe you could purchase, like if you're not at a bank, then it only uses the money you have on your character, so to speak, right? So when you're in a group rating, you can view list sold. Or
I think we have the list sold webpage. I'll double check, but I think we do. Honestly, that would also
be kind of needed. Yeah. It wouldn't be immersive, but if you could just like, let's say you've got a BOE in a dungeon, you could list all right. That's so immersive.
I would not be a fan of that, but
I'm a fan. Just some food walk zone, you get like a troll credit card or something.
Yeah, that would be a very food walk thing. I think we've gone pretty long here, so I think we'll take another question or two. And it will be done. Good that I got scrolled past them a million times. Oh, does overcap offense actually make a difference? Yes.
Yeah,
so all overcap weapon skills do something. When you're making an attack with a weapon, they basically take the average of your offense and your weapon skill. That's how calculations are done. So if you've got 240 offense and 250 one-hand blunt, and you're using a one-hand blunt weapon, it adds them together and takes the average. And then once you hit 250, so once the average is 250, everything past that is way worse. So generally speaking, getting to 250 for any class that doesn't have 250 is super valuable. So that's an average of 250. So if you've got 240 offense, 260 one-hand blunt, that's an average of 250. That's the magic number. Getting past that, way less valuable. Does very little. Does something. Gives you a little bit of accuracy, a little bit of damage, not much.
Is the bonus increase as the enemy becomes more avoidant, say higher agility, or
now it's just a multiplier.
No?
Just a flat multiplier. So basically, what'll happen is like it'll calculate some base numbers, multiply that by your weapon skill, and then later in the calculation, it'll compare your dex versus their agility. A step or two later. So yeah, it doesn't really tell. Let's bring up something that I'm going to know, which is debuffing a mod's agility is very good. You can do that.
Did we talk about allowing like players to exceed the boxing limit in zones for like, say they're trading?
We didn't.
Because we were talking about, yeah. So like, let's say East Commons tunnels. If you have a character selling things there, then you're able to box that in.
Sure. I mean, the current list building system, I don't think that makes a ton of sense, and it's going to throw like false flags for DMs, right? So I'd rather not be able to.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So one thing I am going to talk about now, that isn't a question that I asked, but something Matt asked me the other day. Someone asked me what was going on with Spell Surge, and I've done all the int casters now, so I'm going to get to this. We love Spell Surge. Spell Surge is still there. Spell Surge has been moved to the special tab, so you have to have 250 AAs to buy it. And it now has a cost of 50 AAs. The reason for this is it was intended to be something for like super high tier characters to replace some clickies that got removed. We still want it to be there, but during seasons, getting that basically as soon as you got 12 AAs, in some cases was like increasing caster damage by 75%. Don't really want that bit. So it's still there. You're just not going to be able to get it as soon as you hit 12 AAs. It was just a little much at the very low end.
Spell Surge is a perfect example of designing in a box, right? Because, hey, we removed clickies from the game at the highest tiers, right? There's no consideration to lower tier clickies, right? It was just the highest tier. And we're going to give a solution at the highest tier, right? And then when you did season, it's like, this is actually kind of busted, right? Because just made a change in a very narrow slice of the game, basically. And it caused a lot of problems.
That's also why we rolled back a lot of the stuff that was done to try to buff people at high tiers, buffing low level spells and adding runics to replace them, essentially. Because it was just one of those things where it was literally like we during the season, we'd be like, oh, this class is really strong because we buffed all of their low level spells to fix a problem at tier 14 or whatever. And now it's like, oh, this class is now just insane. So now we're having to go back and like sort things out, and there are gonna be things we missed. Be straight up. Like, I know that the discipline classes are overtuned at low levels and low tiers, and we're probably gonna have to address them after launch. But it's just one of those things where like we're trying to bring up the classes that are particularly bad, like Wizard was. Honestly, the Wizard spells, if you play the Wizard, most people play Wizard the way most people try to play a Wizard, they were very, very, very bad. They were literally like half the damage of any other class. If you knew that you should cast Reigns and only cast your Reigns, they were quite strong. Or like they were comparable to the other casters. They're comparable to Necro, they're comparable to Wizard. But if you're just a person who's coming here expecting, oh, I should cast my single target nukes on single target things, you were just screwing yourself. Actually, I think it's up to like the first 1,000 AAs now.
So my answer to what I'm most excited about is kind of like the long haul picture, kind of say like a year of changes, right? Then maybe 6 more months go by, then maybe we have like a season launch. And then I think because, in the previous environment, we were breaking login records on EMU, right? In that kind of stifled environment, right? So now we are no longer in a stifled environment. So I would like to see just continual growth. And I think as long as, everybody is active and we all work together and there's good ideas and, there's a lot of feedback between players and developers, like just communicating with players was something I've wanted to do for a long time. I never liked the whole like don't talk about this. I'm still kind of having like like because we're in a spoiler season. I don't talk about this. I'm like, I haven't been able to talk about things for years. When can I talk about stuff? Right? It's
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about things, just as long as it's not class spoilers. Oh, the enchanter thing you wanted to ask me. You asked me to spot spoiling last weekend with the focus effect.
Wait, did we bring that up? The thing is, the stuff I work on, I don't get any spoilers.
I mean, that's fine. Like, if you want to do spoilers, well, to be honest, if the
no, I can't.
I mean, to be fair,
the one thing I'm working on, Yeah. What was the channel thing?
Fortification.
Oh yeah, the fortification enhancement. Yeah, we just combined we buffed duration enhancement, but you just post a pet. You can put it in the special channel there.
So the duration increment now is called fortification enhancement, and it also increases the effect of runes of the caster or of the wearer. I think it's the caster, right?
It's the caster. So it's like healing increment. So there are two problems. Duration increment was not as useful with the new aura system, so we wanted to kind of buff that a little bit. And also runes. If you compare the enchanter's big runes to, say, a cleric's big heals, the flat values kind of scale equally, and then it kind of begins to widen when you add focus effects. So my idea was like, well, why don't we have a focus effect that increases runes? Like, that's the thing about, I feel enchanters should, like, a major theme for enchanters is runes. So there's a whole bunch of runes that we could add for spell effects. There are runes that take 10% of the damage you take, and they slowly dwindle it off your hit points. So like, if you have a 1,000-point rune and you get hit for 1,000 damage, it takes 100 of the damage and takes it off the rune. So runes in that system are mitigating a percentage of the damage rather than all the damage all at once. You can convert runes to that system. And this is just kind of more of like a bigger picture of class design. Like, I think runes are a major. Like, if there's one class that's best at runes, it's probably the enchanter, right? But there's really no development on that front. So enchanters healing runes, I don't know. I think so.
No.
Shamans.
Yeah. So
I see what I want to see.
So I mean, I thought about a mitigation healer for a bit. Honestly, it's somewhat problematic from a balance perspective. Like, I would be okay with giving the healers some form of mitigation, like a healer, like some ability to do that. I wouldn't want to go all in on it. I wouldn't want it to just be like, shaman or druid is like the mitigation class. I played a lot of EQ2 where they do that on shamans, and it's cool, but it kind of breaks a lot of stuff unless you tune stuff to be psychotic. And I'd rather not do that. All right. So we'll answer one more question. It's 8:25, so we'll take one more. Oh no.
So yes, fortification enhancement does the same thing duration enhancement does per rank, and it also increases rune strength of the caster by was it 2% per rank or 3%? I don't remember if I changed it to 3%.
I don't know. It was 2, and then I was like, should it be 3? And then I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I think it's 2 right now.
It should probably be 3 to match this game.
Yes. All right, one more question.
If anyone's got a good one, we'll take it. Oh, so Toast, they're just group heal procs. So basically, quick thing about mages, the mage procs aren't procs, they're just abilities that happen on a timer. So in theory, you could use a bunch, and they're just group heals. They're just small group heals. So you could, in theory, have 6 mages just triggering little group heals every, I don't remember if the timer is 12 seconds. So you could do something like that. It wouldn't be super powerful, but it's, especially since, they wouldn't hold very good threat and you'd just be tanking on the mages, but you could do that. Generally, with the mage changes, the thing about the pets is mostly just that. Like, if you looked at what they did under the hood, it would be, we could not do temporary instances. We don't have the tech for that.
You would just see high elf legs.
it's one of those things where we could have the tech for it, just we haven't ported it over yet, and that will require work. But with the mage pets, it was just that like under the hood, they're all really similar. Like literally, the 4 mage pets, the only difference with them were their abilities and their health, and some of those abilities were like super similar. It really like realistically, while leveling, using anything other than air before made 0 sense. They did about the same damage as fire. They had a little less HP than Earth, and they generated more threat than Earth. There was no reason to use anything else.
I think an important major theme right now is that like my battle cry, so to speak, is like, if it can wait till after lunch, let's wait till after lunch, right? Because we were like, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of things you want to do. Like I'm working on core stuff and I want to work on class design, but so it's just really struggling to stay focused on just getting the server launched and operational, and then we've done so much work in
5 months.
This is like 10 years of old patch in like 4 months.
Yeah, we're about to hit 5 months. We're almost at 5, so it's been a whirlwind, man.
So you're gonna see a lot of class. I think, generally speaking, like the mage was launched. We basically this is good. We need to send it how it is right now, right?
There's like the only thing I didn't get to change about mage that I want to change is their AA that provides stances. Not because I don't think the stances are cool, because they are. We just need to get people off of stances, so they need to be converted into AA buttons or something. Gotta figure out how to do that. Like I said, that's like that sort of thing where it's like, okay, this is a problem we know we need to solve, but if we ship it without it, it's not an issue. It's not going to break anything. So we're just trying to make sure, like, big picture, we need to get the core base ideas for the class in place. Like I had a long conversation with someone who was very upset about the Forbidden Harvest change. And I don't blame them for being upset. I knew they were going to be. But the goal here is to make sure that we have a core system that works. And then if people get to, the place where Forbidden Harvest used to kick in and their mana is atrocious, I would rather fix the system as a whole and not just be like, here's a band-aid that makes you pretend mana that doesn't exist at tier 10. When if wizard mana is terrible from tier 1 to tier 9, I don't want it to just be like, oh, I have to play this terrible character that sucks to play, and everyone tells me, oh, it'll get better in 12 tiers. That's not particularly fun to be like, no one wants to play the game with a 5-hour tutorial or like watch the show where they're like, yeah, just grin and bear it through the first season. Like don't want that. Charm cost, nothing to talk about right now. Total XP required, again, nothing to talk about. Just because what we learned during the season as far as XP required goes is you can kill so much stuff with just like 1,000 AAs. And that's on it. You can kill the first 13 tiers of the game, realistically, maybe the first 12. And there's enough changes happening between character balance stuff and raid balance stuff that's going on that trying to sort that out now would be really hard to do. Yeah, we're done now. It's 8:30. It's been 90 minutes. I'm gonna free call up to go, hang out with his wife and kids, and I'm gonna hang out with my wife. So thanks everyone for coming. It was great. We're happy to answer your questions. There's probably only going to be one more QA before launch because we're coming in crunch time now.
I saw 2 in the list.
Yeah, I think she scrapped one, but I'd have to look. Close guest and chat. Okay. All right. Again, thanks everyone for coming. Close guest. Okay, I'm going to do that, and I will thank you all again. Thank you all. We'll let you know when the next one's going to be. It's going to be in a couple weeks. Healer spoilers will start next week. I think they're going to start on Wednesday. We've got some preparatory stuff, but thanks, Cole, for being here. We will catch you guys later.